You okay?
Oh, yeah. Ben! Ben! Ben!
The Return of the Thing. During the time of the original Secret Wars, Ben Grimm had unknowingly stumbled on a cure of his rock-like prison. He had seemingly broken up from his longtime partner Alicia Masters and began changing back to Ben Grimm at inopportune times. Once gaining a handle on his ability to change back and forth to the Thing, Reed Richards had correctly assessed that if Ben returned to Earth, under the same circumstance he lived with throughout that time, he would remain stuck as the Thing. Reed had no way of knowing Ben Grimm and Alicia's relationship was near an end. So Ben stayed on the so-called battle world as Rocky Grimm, going through many adventures off-world which might have been against his own subconscious and his worst enemy. After a Pyrrhic victory against this great foe, Ben Grimm was once again trapped as the Thing. Returning to Earth, he planned on ending his relationship with Alicia Masters after being away from her. He found out she had fallen for his partner, Johnny Storm. With a bruised ego, Ben decided not to return to the Fantastic Four.
It's clobbering time!
It's catchy, right? Isn't that great? Ah, that was the prototype!
Reed, at this time, decided that he had to tell his best friend his own psychological barriers were holding him back from becoming human. The Thing replied, there was no Ben Grimm to become. He died on Battleworld, so Ben Grimm would spend most of his time as a super-powered pro wrestler. After a super short stint with the West Coast Avengers, Ben mutated again, running from the Avengers, the She-Hulk and his female friend, Sharon Ventura, to leave mankind altogether. As a reader, it seems like it was the last we would ever see of Ben Grimm or the Thing.
Special announcements from Mark Gruenwald,
Senior Executive Editor.
We've got some good news and some bad news. The bad news is issue 36 will be the last issue of The Thing. After 100 issues of Marvel 2-in-1 Thing and 36 issues of his own title, old Blue-Eyed Benjamin is going to bid farewell to his own headline feature. Now, what about the good news, you ask? Well, the good news is twofold. First, there's a Thing limited series in the works, written and drawn by the incomparable Barry Windsor Smith, to debut next year. And second, you're going to be able to feast your orbs on the Thing's exploits every month soon in a certain very popular team book. So, wipe those eyes, folks. The world shall not go Thinglessel.
All this had been part of John Byrne's plan since the Thing exited the Fantastic Four.
When I was handed the Fantastic Four, it was a little bit like saying, I've never done drugs before, I think I'll start with heroin. You know, just bam, into the deep end, right?
John Byrne said, we're playing, of course, with the Thing's role in the group. This is building towards the 25th anniversary issue, which is number 296. He has this orbiting role at the moment. He's never going to be permanently removed from the group as far as I'm concerned. When I wrote him out, the intention was always to bring him back, and for the 25th anniversary issue. So we had approximately 2 years. I think it actually works out to 30 issues, that the Thing is out of the book. This gave me the opportunity to mess around with the group dynamics. Obviously, She-Hulk presents a different situation for the group than the Thing did. So Reed and Sue and Johnny all react differently to her than they would to the Thing. This enables me to tap into areas of their personalities that perhaps have never been seen before. Breaking the Thing up with Alicia was a step toward changing him back to the tragic character he originally was. This is an ongoing thing that's going to come to a head towards the end of his own series, now that the Thing has been canceled. There will be a 3 to 5 month break when we won't be seeing him in the Marvel Universe at all. Then he sort of turns up again in 296 in a very different form, physically different, emotionally different, and much more like the Thing of the first 3 or 4 issues. Even going to 4 is going a bit far because he was starting to mellow out even then. We're going to go back to a Thing who is angrier about being the Thing, more bitter, more Thing-like. He's not a monster anymore. The Thing is somebody you should be frightened of, not somebody you should want to go and cuddle. Remember, the public regarded him simultaneously as a monster and a hero in the early issues. He's going to be less of a known quantity again, but it will still be obvious that even though this guy is ugly and nasty and snarls at everybody, he still does good work. There's no way to get around the fact that this guy's on our side, that he's one of the good guys. That, of course, was the charm of these first issues of the Fantastic Four, the inherent contradiction of the monster as the good guy. Stan Lee, in structuring those early days, clearly wanted to take every comic cliché he could lay hands on and then twist it. He did that very much with the FF. He took the first 10 years of the existence of Marvel Comics, when it was all I battled Groot and things like that.
I am Groot!
And took your standard issue, Monster, and twisted it, made him the good guy. The Thing will come back as a permanent member of the Fantastic Four. The whole thrust of FF236, the 20th anniversary story, was to do a story that was more or less completely divorced from the regular book so that it could sort of stand on its own as a movie. In the 25th anniversary issue, I'm going to be doing essentially the same thing in that you'll be able to pick up these guys even if you've never seen them before. But I also want to fill it up with all kinds of little, almost subliminal, finish-type stuff that people will recognize as being references to earlier stories. The title of Fantastic Four 296 is Return to Monster Isle. The basic premise is that Reed, Sue, Johnny, and She-Hulk are out in California, and they go out to the old rocket base in Central City. It's all grown over with weeds and looking pretty scraggy the way Cape Canaveral is these days. The first part of the issue, as it now stands, will be a retelling of Fantastic Four #1, as they tell their origin to She-Hulk, their first battle with the Mole Man and all that. But things start happening as the world is assaulted by wide-ranging earthquakes, which Reed Richards pinpoints as having their source at Monster Island. So they go tripping off to Monster Island, or where it used to be, and discover that what was now there is basically a very large hole, into which seawater has been pouring for years. It's been gushing down into the tunnels that the Mole Man appropriated from the Deviants and has managed, in many cases, to work its way quite a ways down into the vicinities of the center of the Earth. As a result, it's coming back as superheated steam, which is causing vast pressures to build up underneath the crust of the Earth, which is what's probably causing all of these giant earthquakes globally. They are about to do what they can to undo this damage when the Mole Man turns up. He's still there, still lurking around, and he's got all kinds of things happening involving that group of outcasts that he put together. Also, the Mole Man has discovered that the Valley of the Diamonds is not in fact a natural phenomenon. The diamonds are mystical, which, if you immerse yourself in it, you are transformed into whatever you are in your heart of hearts. What follows is a story in which the FF try to avert final disaster for the world, while the Mole Man is convinced that they're just there to make trouble for him again. But if that's not enough, the Thing turns up. He has been driven to Monster Island, convinced that it is the only place for a monster such as himself. There, the Thing comes face to face with what he is in his heart of hearts. The Thing is reunited with the FF in this adventure, and at the end, we get back to New York for an anniversary party. It's kind of a separate story at the end of the issue, which unveils the FF's new headquarters and has virtually the entire Marvel Universe guest starring, including folks from Marvel. Not only was all of this planned with the return of the Thing, Byrne was planning a year-long Doom War between Dr. Doom and Christoph. There was a hint of Johnny and Alicia tying the knot, which was not announced or definite like Sue Richards' second pregnancy and the resolution of the last Galactus story. Byrne said on his website, Byrnerobotics. A lot of things happened in my last days on the FF. You may recall, this was when I was gearing up to doing my run on Superman, and, being perhaps a bit Pollyanna in my younger days, actually thought I would be able to work on both books without interference. I had even been given the blessing from the putative publisher. I had written a letter to Marvel's then head honcho, Mike Hobson, announcing my new plans, along with my hope to continue on the Fantastic Four. Mike responded with a glowing letter of encouragement, saying he hoped the Superman project was a huge success, as anything that benefited DC would ultimately benefit the industry as a whole. This is called classy. But alas, I overlooked the office of editor-in-chief. If you worked at Marvel in those days, one of the things that became increasingly apparent was that the books that were the most successful were the ones that came under the most stringent scrutiny by the EIC. Thus, the X books were constantly under fire, as were the Spider-Man books, and of course, the FF, which was one of Marvel's top sellers at the time. Since it became increasingly impossible for me to do anything right, in the eyes of the EIC, my decision to do Superman was just one more nail in the coffin. Suddenly, overnight, I could do absolutely nothing right.
I kept talking to John. I wasn't making a dent. I don't think he was even understanding what I was telling him.
Remember the return of Jean Grey in Fantastic Four 286? Completely approved, in every detail, before I announced I was going to do Superman. After the announcement, redrawn and rewritten copiously. Which is why I had my name taken off it. Shooter then insisted that I would receive no royalties on that issue, since my name not being on it meant that I did not contribute to the sales. I wonder if he thought that would bluff me into changing my stance. Byrne would also respond he never got a reason why the book had to be redrawn. I ultimately left the book just to spare Mike Carlin the constant barrage of nitpicks. Then Shooter fired Carlin saying it was Mike's fault Byrne left.
Yeah, I'm not going to get into that.
Oh, that's fair.
But I will say that it was the best thing that ever happened to me because I knew people at DC by that point. My problems with him had to do with how he was treating all of us anyway.
With Byrne gone, Jim Shooter would plot Fantastic Four 296 and bring the Thing back to the title with Stan Lee scripting the issue along with a host of artists. Though Byrne would write and draw the Thing many more times in other titles, he would never get to do Ben as the tortured soul of the early Fantastic Four issues again. He would never get Ben fully back to basics. Ben Grimm would still face many challenges post-Byrne, but he would remain the ever-loving blue-eyed Thing, the idol of millions.
What the heck? Maybe it isn't so bad being the ever-loving Thing.
It would only be Kirby and Byrne that would pull the curtain back and show what Ben was truly going through as the Thing. Barry Windsor Smith almost went there with his graphic novel, which never came out. Then the final question is, should Ben be able to turn back and forth like the rest of his teammates? Stan Lee once said, "Never give the fans what they think they want."
I was a big fan of John's work.
Artist, writer, and editor Al Milgrom would describe the same thing more succinctly. I always thought listening to the readers dulls your own editorial point of view. You don't want to give the readers exactly what they want, because then it's too predictable. The good analogy is the readers who used to write in saying, "We'd like the Thing to be able to turn back into Ben Grimm at will so he can be happy." They didn't mean that they really wanted the Thing to have no problems. They just meant they were sympathetic with the situation. So if I'd taken their advice and we'd done something like that with the Thing, it would have taken away a lot of drama of the character.
Okay. Is this guy good or what?